it was a remote company. We always had people who, enjoyed having high autonomy, being able to get stuff done on their own schedules. Pre-pandemic, and we were remote before the pandemic, I used to have to ask people in interviews like, hey, how do you think you're going to work in an online environment? Do you have the discipline to do things on a daily basis? Like, have you ever worked remotely? And we disqualified a lot of people because they, couldn't handle that sort of accountability and self-accountability, really. But over the years, it's worked really well for us. We have a team that's, people set their own schedules for the most part. They, get stuff done on their own time. But, we still work as a cohesive team. Everybody, is online all the time getting stuff done. It's just, you can do it from the comfort of your own home, and, you don't have a boss that's literally looking over your shoulders.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about a hands-free culture. You may be wondering, what is a hands-free culture? My interpretation of that is one culture that doesn't require you to control or micromanage in any way. In fact, it's much higher level than that. Your people are thinking for themselves. They are solving problems and challenges. They're identifying things. They're proactive. In a hands-off culture, you really have something special. So today's guest is the founder of Blue Ink Digital and Standard Information, two companies. The Blue Ink Digital company made the Ink list recently, and we have Greg Dobak on the show with us. When you think about your culture, would you like it to be a little bit more hands-off? A hands-off culture will allow you to focus your energy, your time, your resources on the highest value work in the company so that you can continue to grow. You do the work that you really love to do, and maybe the work that you're only uniquely qualified to do, and everyone else is moving the ball forward. You're not pulling them along, they're pushing you. That hands-off culture is sort of the holy grail. And so Greg and I talk about that today. One of the things that we unpack in there is asynchronous accountability. Accountability is a very important tool inside of a hands-free culture, but we talk about that so that you have some insight about how to put that into your business. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm a CEO coach. We do executive coaching. We do leadership development, mostly for fast growth companies. One of the things that we're really known for is helping companies grow through different phases, and the leaders must evolve in order to be proactive and be the kind of leaders that they need to be. And you have to shift your leadership model to do that. And I've got a lot of tools and frameworks we use to help companies and leaders understand that. If you're curious about that, come to one of our next trainings. You can check out the next one at training.coreelevation.com. That will give you a real good insight of what we do. You don't have to pay anything. It's all for free. Just check it out. Love to see you there. Back to the interview with Greg. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Looking forward to today's conversation. Before we dive in, tell us about your company, Standard Information.
Sure. Yeah, happy to jump into it. And thanks for having me on the show, Gene. So Standard Information is essentially an all-in-one platform for companies who are doing lead generation. If they're buying leads, if they're working with a lot of different consumers, it's an all-in-one platform to basically take in leads, distribute leads, and more we've become an AI company where you can now manage AI. So you can contact leads, run automated call centers, have AI take care of the selling portion of new client intake and new client qualification.
I know you also run Blue Ink Digital. I'm going to let you kind of work that in as well, but how do you think AI is going to shift marketing in the next 2 years?
Oh, I mean, that's a huge topic. I think it's going to revolutionize the whole thing. And so I think from top to bottom, I mean, specifically in our industry, and Blue Ink was the first company I started, and that's a lead generation company. So is more of an agency model, works primarily with home service companies, insurance companies to do the lead generation, generate the interest, get those people, reaching out about those services. And then Standard Information is a software that basically powers those kind of companies. But in that kind of context, I think that everything from copywriting to asset creation to the initial contact and selling, especially in these high volume verticals like home services or insurance, financial products, It's all going to be done by AI. I think you're going to see AI ads written by AI bots. And then when you call in to say, hey, I need a new roof, you're going to talk to an AI who's going to take you through the process. And then, you won't talk to a person until somebody's at your house.
I don't disagree with that. I know some of that can be done today. Some of it's still going to be, kind of a little bit of a challenge, if you will. It's not, completely end to end at this point, but it is moving fast. When you think about AI, and this is just out of curiosity, is there a specific tool that you think is like head and shoulders above others when it comes to marketing?
Oh, no, not yet. I think it's so new and people are so cutting edge on this right now. I mean, I think you have like the backbone kind of AI, the Chat GPTs, the, Google Geminis, like that people are building off of, right? Like that's the CPU of it, right? And it's like that is like the core thing. And then you have some really cool companies like Thoughtly and what's the other one? There's another one just using the other day that, you can build these agents on and you can like start doing this infrastructure plays. And then, companies like Standard Information where you can kind of administer it. But, it's changing so fast. Like it seems like every other day, there's a new technology, a new way of slicing it up. I think it's gonna be a little while before we see like true dominance emerge in the industry.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be 100 players. I think there'll be some that kind of like the way Google was. Um, we're going to get away from the AI for anyone who's listening to this. We're going to really talk about creating a hands-off culture, which is the core of today's conversation. But I am fascinated with AI. I think that there's always going to be a human element to most things, and you might even want to have an AI agent because it can answer your questions more thoroughly than a human probably could in
Yeah.
the future. And then also the empathy that you will have with a human is can't be replaced at this point with AI. Greg,
Yeah.
one of the things that we do here is we look and research companies that are doing good, especially having good leadership. And one of the things that you guys are doing is a hands-off culture. Was this intentionally to have a culture like that when you started the company, or was this something that was developed along the journey?
I mean, it was a bit of both. And so the company, especially going back to Blue Ink, which is, almost 8 years old, it was a remote company. We always had people who, enjoyed having high autonomy, being able to get stuff done on their own schedules. Pre-pandemic, and we were remote before the pandemic, I used to have to ask people in interviews like, hey, how do you think you're going to work in an online environment? Do you have the discipline to do things on a daily basis? Like, have you ever worked remotely? And we disqualified a lot of people because they, couldn't handle that sort of accountability and self accountability really. But over the years, it's worked really well for us. We have a team that's, you know, people set their own schedules for the most part. They, get stuff done on their own time, but we still work as a cohesive team. Everybody, is online all the time getting stuff done. It's just, you can do it from the comfort of your own home and, you don't have a boss that's literally looking over your shoulders.
Would you say that your team is completely 100% remote?
Yeah, 100% remote with both
And
companies, actually.
I'm kind of curious about what we would see across the organization for a hands-off culture. What I'm envisioning is different ways of autonomy, or not, different ways of accountability, excuse me, and then also having some asynchronous kind of systems that allow you to get work in different time zones, but everything keeps moving. Would you walk us through what we would actually visually see if we were, looking over your shoulder on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. I mean, I think the accountability comes in two forms. I think you have task accountability, like we want to hold people to getting things done when they say they're going to be done. And then we have social accountability, which I think is a stronger driver, to be honest, which is, even though we're remote, we have a very close-knit team. We're talking every day, we're online all the time. And so I think the accountability of, hey, when someone says they're going to get something done or they own a project or they want to drive something through, the social accountability of the team I think has been the biggest driver of making sure things get done. Which isn't maybe that much different than an in-person environment. And I think you have to be able to build those bonds. And maybe it's a little tougher virtually, but still pretty core to our process.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been doing this for years and I've never heard the term social accountability. Where did you get it from?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if maybe I read that in a book somewhere. It's not a term that yeah, I mean we just kind of use it in the sense like, especially with with smaller teams or smaller groups, and that's kind of how the teams work in smaller groups, is that you are socially accountable to everybody else. And in our culture, everybody's pretty accountable to everybody else, and I think that's been a good driver.
Is that like peer-to-peer accountability?
It is. It is peer-to-peer accountability. It's also, I mean, it's still, accountability to, boss to employee as
Sure.
well. And so, my employees are accountable in that same way. But I think that what's kind of driven our culture is you want to make sure that you're seen in a good light. People want to be professionals. They want to be good at what they're doing, and they want everybody else on the team to think they're good and to think that they're really crushing their individual thing. And so that's what we kind of hire for, is that like people who want to prove that, hey, I'm really good. I own this space. I'm a top-notch employee. I'm a professional in this space. And I think that comes from the validation of other people who they see as being top-notch as well.
So, Greg, as you know, I'm a coach and I love questions. And interview questions is just a type of question. In order to tune in whether someone would be a fit for your hands-off culture, do you have an interview question that helps you assess that quickly?
And again, we used to go with like, hey, like, tell me like about how you've worked remotely. How was that? And that used to be a killer question pre-pandemic. But now everybody's worked remotely, and so that is no longer a huge identifier. Now we get people like, ask them, try and subtly get to that, like, oh, did you thrive or did you struggle during the pandemic working remotely? And that can be a good indicator. But a lot of it was like, how do you solve problems? And that's when I usually ask everybody, is like, walk me through a problem that was difficult, and then also walk me through a problem that you couldn't solve or that you failed at. And I think understanding how people fail at tasks and when they struggle, which can be very hard to get to in an hour interview, is still the best indicator. Everybody's succeeding. It's easy to succeed. It's like that's no problem. But like, how do you deal with failures? I think the defining feature of an organization and of a person that you want to work with.
Now, I just asked Greg about an interview question. Let me give you just a little bit of insight around this. If you have an interview question based on the values of your company, you want to put them together in a way that's indirect. You can't ask someone if they have high integrity. You've got to find a question that allows them to show you their natural tendencies. I'm not going to give you the question today. I've given it questions before, but this will really help you create a better way to determine if someone naturally aligns with the culture and with your culture, your values. And so it's just one tool I've used over and over and over, and it's really helpful. Back to Greg. One of the things I get to do is have all these interviews. We're over 1,200 interviews now, and really exciting to be able to share patterns and research back. We do it through speeches, we do it through books and whatnot. Yeah. But the pattern of having a culture where failure is okay is very dominant in fast growth companies. Any culture I know that has said that failures, we're minimizing on this stuff. I know they're not innovating. I know they're not pushing the boundaries. But the fact that you have AI ingrained into your companies, I know that you're innovating, and so you've got to be okay with failure. So just a point of reference for you and those listening.
That's good. I'm glad we're not alone there.
Yeah, Greg. Hands-off culture takes a certain style of leadership. How would you describe your style of leadership in your hands-off culture?
That's a good question. I can see you've done 1,200 of these. Yeah, I think in our setup, I mean, again, it kind of comes back down to the accountability. And so I know people don't like being micromanaged. And so I really try not to micromanage people in all sense of the word. I mean, so I like to let people try and figure it out themselves, find their own solutions, find the path that makes the most sense to them. Obviously, the more success, the better they're doing, the more growth, they get a longer leash. And in a sense, when things aren't going as well, you come in and you start asking a lot harder questions, and maybe that leash gets a little bit shorter. But I think in the end, it kind of comes down to giving people the ability to show how good they can be. I think people want to succeed generally, and especially people that we hire that want to do well. And so giving them the opportunity to do that has kind of been how we approach that.
Every leader has been through some tough times, inflection points, if you will. I'm curious if you could share back an inflection point that shifted the way you lead, that has allowed you to create the growth that you have in both of these companies, but also this hands-off culture.
Yeah. I mean, if it was always easy, everybody would do it, I guess. Um, I mean, a couple of years back, we went through a kind of an inflection point. There was a lot of regulation changes in the industry. Things were changing a lot for us there. And then at a certain point, like as the company gets bigger, you can't be involved with every little thing. Um, and so I think kind of a big inflection point for us and how we move forward was just being able to get to be a big enough company that people were working on different things that everybody else in the company didn't know about. And I think at first that's kind of hard because you have a certain way of doing things. Everybody knows where every file is saved. And then at a certain point, you hit that point where, hey, I don't have anything to do with this project anymore. And being able to know that those projects are in good hands with different people. When we hit kind of that slowdown, it kind of came back to looking at then like, putting different people in charge of different aspects and making sure they were able to kind of move through it. And then also where things weren't working well, making those hard choices to where do you cut? Where do you have to like, pull in the belt a little bit so you can get back to growth? And so, again, letting people shine and be good where they can kind of help there. And like, if, you're in a high accountability business like this, where, there's not a lot of hand holding, if you're not cutting it, also that means that you end up getting cut as well.
We keep coming back to accountability. So I feel like such a central part of this hands-off culture. I'm really curious because I've had a few of my clients that have actually asked about ways to ramp up accountability. And, they were doing a lot of meetings and they're like, we don't need any more meetings. And so we discussed asynchronous accountability. Do
Hmm.
you feel like you guys have adopted something that's asynchronous? And I can explain that if you need me to.
think I understand what you're saying with asynchronous accountability. And tell me if I'm kind of on the same thread as what you were thinking, but one of the things that we've done is we let people sometimes set their own goals, which has been helpful. Because a lot of times, goals like, hey, I want you to do X%, growth, or I want you to hit X goals. But having somebody like, hey, next week I want you to come together and say, within your business unit, what do you think would be stellar growth? Would it be, awesome improvement? What would you like to be judged on? And then, people come back to you. Sometimes people come back to you and they set way more aggressive, way more ambitious goals for themselves when they have the accountability and the autonomy to do that than you would. And so that has been something where it's like, okay, I'm not, it's a little asynchronous. You come back to me, you tell me what you think you can do, you tell me how you think you can get there. And obviously like, hey, I just want to send 5 emails next week and that's my goal. It's like, okay, we're gonna work on that a little bit. But like if people come back with and surprise you a lot of times, and I think then you get that ownership and you get that, they're working on it themselves and it doesn't have to necessarily come from me. And if I guess that might kind of fall in what you'd call asynchronous in that sense. Or did you have something else in mind? Is another tool that your framework that you've seen that's worked well?
So we unpacked asynchronous accountability. One thing that I wanted to highlight for you today is, in this culture of remote or not, you want to make sure accountability isn't just something you do in meetings. You want to make sure there's accountability in between the meetings and that people are aware of what others are doing and they are able to demonstrate that. It really does boost morale when it's done well. The low performers I found will actually exit themselves, which is a good thing. And the high performers will enjoy talking about the things that they're doing. You get to look at the accountability on your own time, and then you get to decide when you have the next conversations for coaching or maybe in a tough conversation with that employee. So asynchronous accountability is all the rage today. Check it out. And if you need more information on it, just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. And back to Greg. You're asking me on the
Yeah,
asynchronous
yeah,
tools?
yeah. I'm curious. I mean, you've done a
I,
lot.
one of the simplest things I've seen is we did this for a sales team, and I've implemented it with my own team, and a few other clients have really appreciated it. But having a simple Google document each week that lists out what you did, not what you're working on, but what you actually did and completed,
Yep.
and then listing in another, kind of cell, defining what your priority is. The reason
Okay.
I like that is because if they tell me what they did,
Hmm.
I can see, I can, I'm not tracking time. I'm not micromanaging. I'm not recording screens. Every one of my team members is remote as well.
Nice.
But I love to be able to just see what they're doing, and they put links in there to documents and things like that. But then also, I love to see what their priorities are for next week. Because if I have a different priority for them, I get a chance to shape that because clarity is such an important piece. And I'm not, you are the expert today for hands-off culture, but having them fill that out in their own time once a week, having a level of ownership around showing up, telling their peers what they did, being proud of it, and everyone knowing that they did something and they completed it. Because you don't want to go 2 or 3 weeks without completing a project, right?
Yep.
So just a simple tool that we use there.
I like that. We do something similar. We have a weekly stand up every Thursday, and everybody on the team has we do it on Google Slides, and so everybody presents their Google slide, what they worked on, what they're working on, and what their blockers are, and that has been a pretty useful tool.
Great example of asynchronous accountability. I use a spreadsheet, use Google Slides, but giving Google we're
I
trying to.
know, right, babe? A little Google ad here.
We used to have to talk about collaboration like 10, 15 years ago. Now it's just a way of us doing business. Greg, I'm really excited to have you on the show. We're going to wrap up here with one last question.
Sure.
What's next for your leadership? If you've got a hands-off culture now, I know you've got multiple businesses, Blue Ink Digital, you've got Standard Information, but help us understand what's next for you and what's possible because your team runs effectively without you overseeing every aspect and making decisions.
I mean, I think that the big challenge and what's kind of next is trying to find the people who can come in and help enable that growth. And so a lot of it's like finding the key people who can also inspire and build that kind of same framework underneath them. And so for us as we grow and we keep going, it's like trying to have those really good key hires for people who can work remotely, who can have this sort of like bring the energy that will get other people to get things done is probably it's top of mind, and it's probably the hardest thing to nail. And I think that's been probably the biggest thing on our side. If you're not talking about like technical or like engineering kind of problems, if you're talking people problems, then it's finding those kind of rare people who can lead, who can do this, especially in a remote environment, because that takes an extra little something.
We're going to wrap up today. I'm going to make a prediction, Greg, and I say this with a smile. I've had a number of people that have been on the show before. They rarely come back to me and say, what, I got a new deal because of this. But they do come back and say, I had an incredible new hire sit down in front of me. They listened to the interview and they liked the company. They like what we stand for. And I just want to appreciate you for drawing it out of me so that I could hire a really, talented A player. And that's happened a dozen times or more. So I predict it's going to happen for you.
Hey, I hope so.
Greg, thanks for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Awesome. Thanks, Gene. Really appreciate it.
Wow. Another great interview here. I love what we do. Sharing this insight. It's incredible to serve you. I can't wait to really help you. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, encourage. We'll see you next time.